Let's now try to break all of these down. We're speaking today to Alex Escucha. He's the president of the Institute of Development and Econometrics Analysis, and he joins us via Zoom. And I should add, he was also a past president of the Philippine Economic Society. Good morning, Alex. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Regina. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us so early. Listen, there's so much to hash out, but I haven't spoken to you since the Q3 GDP numbers have come out. I wanted to know first and foremost what your take on it was. We know at this point that public spending, the collapse in public spending is what dragged down the overall number. But is there more to the story that we're not seeing?
Definitely, yes. Many of those who have been interviewed were basically attributing the slowdown to the corruption scandal and even the Trump tariffs. But I have a slightly different take. Last month, I said that the infrastructure budget was 1.5 trillion, which is 5.5 to 6% of GDP, which is equal to the budget deficit for the year, for the next 3-4 years. Okay, if since at least half of that are stolen away or lost as leakage, my thesis is that even if that is the slowdown, which is shown in the -4% government construction decline, that is not necessarily a bad thing, because you're basically it used to be that the more you spend and you're expecting more bang for the buck, that would result in better multiplier effects for the economy. But as we have clearly seen in the last 3 to 4 months, we've increased the infra spending from 1.5 to 2% of GDP to 5 to 6% of GDP. But half of that is stolen. So we have been spending more bang, but we got zero back for it. So I think just consolidating the spending so that it really is going to really be resulting in real projects. That to me is a good thing. The second part, for example, if you recall the other day, President BBM ordered the DPWH to reduce its cost of materials by 50%. Because they are really not only overpriced by 100%, easily 5 to 10 times. No? So just that alone will mean less spending for the same projects, and meaning you're cutting the leakage out of that. But the third implication, Regina, I was chatting on the side of the Tuesday Club with former Secretary of Finance, Ben Jokno. And he knows the whole budget process very well. I agree with him in his assessment that this is not a one-off. In fact, right now in DPWH, everybody is petrified into inaction. Nobody wants to sign papers. Nobody wants to sign a certification that the project has been finished, because they have no idea where it is and whether it was actually finished. And that will play out at least to the next 2 to 3 quarters. Remember, so many of these district engineers have been replaced. So it will take time for them to really get their seats warm, know exactly where their project, the lay of the land, so to say, in terms of where the projects are, which ones are really ongoing, real time, and with physical evidence on the ground, and which ones were really ghost projects that they could not trace.
Those are all great points, Alex. And the first point, we actually have a chart to show that
Yes.
to show that there's been a steep drop in public spending. But let me home in on your third point, which is pretty worrisome to me. You don't think this is a one-off? Because there was a time when we were talking about 6% growth track, right? And then it became 5-ish, in the 5-ish level. And, the officials were still saying, oh, don't worry, we're still the second fastest growing economy in Southeast Asia. 5% is still pretty healthy numbers. Are you now saying that we're going to be below 5%? You're seeing this is the track you're seeing for us right now?
I'm saying I would not be surprised. Remember, the hierarchy is that during Pinoy's time, actually, Secretary RC prepared an Ambition 2040, where we would be upper middle income class by 2030, 2040. But that required growth of 8 to 10%. Then that was translated into Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028. The growth there was 6.5 to 7.5. But in the Development Budget Coordinating Committee, where the numbers are really laid out in terms of how much is the expenditure, how much is the revenues, how much is the deficit, how much they need to borrow, those expectations have been tempered. But let me add that it is not all negative. My friend Shell Habito, and if you look at the another chart on the sectoral growth, contrary to initial impressions that the Trump tariffs pushed down our exports, it actually grew. It actually grew in the third quarter. So it's not necessarily negative because from the very start, our electronics and semiconductors exports were really sort of supposedly ring fenced because these are inputs to American manufacturing products. So I think they're still basically okay in that sense.
Right. Actually, you're right. Shell Habito wrote about that in his latest column, saying that actually our exports acceleration have been accelerating in recent years. But at the moment, we know that the tariffs are still being negotiated. We're sitting at 9%, 19%
Yes.
right now, but officials are saying they're still negotiating that behind the scenes. What is the minimum that you want to see here?
Well, I sort of two impressions on the exports. For one, the growth for this quarter is good, and I expect that to continue through the rest of the year. However, I just came from an annual convention of the Philippine Economic Society and the annual convention of the East Asia Economic Association. What bothered me was the statistic that and this is a number that is documented. Our number of exporters have actually declined from 3,500 to around 2,700 exporters. No? So that is not a very good thing to see for the size of our economy. In other words, medyo nag-outperform for this quarter, but long term, I'm not sure whether that is sustainable. Because looking at the numbers of the last 20 years, one thing that sort of bothered me was that the World Bank and ADB economists were showing charts where our ASEAN neighbors, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, were showing everybody's agriculture share to GDP was going down. That is to be expected. But these other countries, their share of manufacturing industry was going up, except the Philippines. While the Philippines, the share of services to GDP was the only one that was really shooting up. In other words, our manufacturing industrial base has really been hollowed out, so to say. And I discussed it this last month that the share of manufacturing to GDP has really gone down, and what really is left for us are light manufacturers, food and beverage, and semiconductor electronics assembly, testing, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't know anyone who's been very positive about the manufacturing sector. But Alex, two things are unique. Not unique, but one thing is unique about the Philippine economy, and the other thing that I wanted to point out was the first is that the thing that's unique about the Philippine economy is that we are also heavily reliant on remittances, right? And we are entering into the peak remittance period, which is the Q4 of the year. BPOs also, we tend to see higher BPO remittances during that time. But also the second thing that could be an offsetting factor is I know that the government is hard at work trying to work out free trade agreements, right? It's just signed on one with the UAE. And then also yesterday I was talking to the EU ambassador to the Philippines, Massimo Santoro, who said progress. Its talks are progressing very well for the EU-Philippines FTA. Are these enough to shore up the economy?
Those are good initiatives, but these individual small countries account for a very small share of our markets as total exports. The biggest is still US and China. So it would be really what sort of disappointed us in the Foundation for Economic Freedom is that we chose to agree to retain the higher tariffs and not get zero tariff for our manufactured exports. Instead, the government chose to protect the agricultural sector, which is already inefficient and really has not been the contribution to the total economy. It has the largest share of employment, but one of the smallest share to total output
Yeah,
as a percentage of GDP.
but Alex, isn't that the right way to go, though? I mean, it's a kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, right? Of course, they would have to protect the agricultural sector because if they do allow a lot of these U.S. imports, for instance, to come in tariff-free, then where does that leave our farmers, right? Where does that leave our food industry? You're saying you see it differently.
Well, the equation is simple. We have more than 110 consumers of rice, for example, versus 2 million, maybe at most 3 million rice farmers. So you're basically protecting a very small proportion of the population at the expense of the bigger population. Our Department of Agriculture budget, 80% of it is devoted to rice. But we are still a net rice importing country. DBM himself in his first SONA acknowledged that we produce 16 million metric tons of palay, but we consume 20 million. So there's always been a gap of 4 million. So you add to that the layer that water is always a problem that affects our agriculture adversely. Either we have too little of it,
Yeah.
droughts during La Nina, or too much of it. Like this entire year is El Nino. You recall, walang mainit na months eh. Hanggang December, magkakaroon pa tayong bagyo.
So you want to see policies that benefit the majority, not so much the minority, because it's policies that benefit the greater good in essence. Alex, we're running out of time, but I did want to ask you one last question, which is, as I said, you were a former president of the Philippine Economic Society. You guys have seen a lot of crises in your lifetime. Is this the worst that you've ever seen it?
Well, definitely not the worst. The 1983 crisis, of course, was worse. We had to end up rationing foreign exchange. The Asian crisis is, in some respects, in 1997, is worse than this. The 2008 were relatively unscathed because it involved only maybe a couple of banks. However, one last point lang, Regina, no? We said the ideal outcome of these investigations is, number one, identify the culprit; two, punish them; three, return the money and make sure it doesn't happen again. And I said also that I'm not as interested in the investigations in the House, the Senate, or even in the ICI. The important battleground where things should happen really is in the Ombudsman and in the Sandigan Bayan. So you cannot blame people when 10, 15 years after the PIDAP, then you hear these announcements of all these personalities being acquitted by the Sandigan Bayan.
Yeah.
So parang it doesn't send the message that crime does not pay. It seems it does. So that is the thing that we need to address, the Ombudsman side and the Sandigan Bayan.
So you, like most people, want to see judicial reform and you want to see clear, hard convictions. So count me with that.
Yes.
But thank you so much for your insights this morning. That was Alex Escucha, President of the Institute of Development and Econometrics Analyses and former President of the PES.